and people on. Sue, will you make sure that's working? Because I started it without it. There we go. Oh, I need to back up a little bit. You make sure it's working. Sue? Okay, sorry about that. I think I've got things operating correctly. Ecclesiastes chapter 10. And about dead flies, what do they do to the perfumer's concoction? What is it? What happens? Gives off a foul odor. What is the parallel that is given there in verse 1? So does a little folly to one respected for wisdom and honor. Like a fly that would land in your perfume and cause it to give a bad odor. Huh? What? Like a fly that would land. It's there. What would? Anyway, what is the result? The thing that you've prepared, that you've labored for, and that is going to produce something desirable, gets ruined. Now, you follow the trace of how Solomon, the critic, is examining all of these things, and he's showing the value of whereas this folly that is on the earth. It's a vain thing that is on the earth, and we're going to get to it when we get into the next. Well, let me just read it up a little bit. A wise man's heart is in his right hand, and a fool's heart is in his left. Even when a fool walks along the way, he lacks wisdom, and he shows everyone that he is a fool. If the spirit of a ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for reconciliation pacifies great. So then he says in verse 5 that there's an evil that occurs on the earth. Somebody read verse 6 for me.
Only is said in great dignity, while the rich sit in a lowly place. I have seen servants on horses.
Okay, verse 8. He who digs a pit falls into it, and whoever breaks through a wall is bitten by a serpent, and he who quarries stones may be hurt by them, and he who splits wood may be endangered by it. And if the axe is dull, then the one who sharpens it, one does not sharpen his edge, then he must use more strength. But wisdom brings success. A serpent may bite when it is charmed, and the babbler is no different. So I'm trying to run forward into the reality of the person that has character. Verse 1. When he's talking about the more you do, the more you put yourself out there, the more active you are. We just read that in those few verses. If you go out and hew out stones, what's the risk? You get hurt by the stone. So, life under the sun, he's given us this. The more you're capable of, the more active you are, the more you are at risk. Yes. That. It's planning, preparing, and executing with safety. The individual that had made his life a sweet-smelling savor, a perfume, allowed a fly to land on it, in it. And the parallel is just that you stink up a good life. And it wouldn't be noticed if you were a hooligan all the time. If you were always bad, then nobody would notice when you were bad. They would just notice that you are that way. But if you are a person in this text that is of repute, so does one respected for wisdom and honor. We have to apply all the time. And the result, and again, these are things that help us, because don't be arbitrary when you put yourself out there. You got to be a person of integrity. The little folly gives off a foul odor, and he begins to talk about breathing nonsense. And this is a wise man's heart. Okay, I have a question on verse 2. What does this mean? A wise man's heart turns him toward his right hand, and a fool's toward his left. What does that mean? What's the implication or the import of that? What does it mean? How does Jesus use the right and the left in his illustration of judgment? So there's this, and he's just explaining the simplicity of decision making. And the wise man's heart is leaning to make the right decision. The fool's heart is leaning in the wrong, and it's all about direction. And that's where, in my title of the outline about wisdom is profitable to direct, is that's what this study has really been all about. Because remember the question that we asked at the beginning of our study? Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and verse 3. We're asking a question: what profit has a man for all of his labor? And now he's just pointing us to things that can happen as we labor, as we work. And chapter 10, what do we learn about the fool in verse 3? Are these things complicated to figure out or understand or to see? What does he say? If a fool walks down the street, he can't hide it. You just can't hide foolishness. These three verses sneaking here together is just the fact that you can't hide foolish behavior. It's going to stink up your life, and everybody's going to smell it. That's just the way it's going to be. Foolish behavior is going to generate, no matter how sweet you are, it's going to put a dead fly in the middle of the ointment. Likewise, if you live with wisdom and honor, or you're respected for wisdom and honor, then live that way and don't disappoint. And then he's talking, well, let's just get to it. Verse 4 through 7. That text. If the spirit of the ruler rises against you, do not leave your post, for conciliation pacifies great offenses. All right. This class is a little harder. The next two will be a little easier, but you just have blocks of statements that you kind of have to draw life principles out of. We're seeing how that in the very beginning of this life under the sun that is vain, that, the more you had, the more possessions you had, the more you had to worry about. And then the more you knew, the more you had to worry about. Now he's even showing the difficulty in this folly that is great, and that is that things get out of order. What does he say in verse 7? I've seen servants on horses while princes walk on the ground like servants. What does he mean by that? What do you suppose Solomon means in that respect? I think he is saying in life we have principles of order, correct? However, events occur that flip the script, that reverse it. The righteous man is suddenly known for his folly, not his goodness, his other deeds. And I've seen servants on horses while princes walk on the ground. And then he begins just to go straight into the fact that, well, in verse 4, this is what I had in my reference about a key life principle, and that is, if the spirit of a ruler rises against you, do not leave your post. What do you think that means? What advice are we being given now?
Sounds like you fall out of favor. Don't stop doing your job. Just keep doing it.
Okay. So if I can pull anything out of all this, because I'm sorry that it seems to be segmented this way, but if you can pull anything out of it, it is, okay, you're doing right, you make a mess, you have things that are out of order, but he's saying continue, don't stop. Wisdom is there to direct our next step. He's acknowledging that we can mess it up. And that is, an evil that's on the earth, and that even the order of you being in a position that you should be riding and you're walking. And he's just observing these things. And then I guess a calm response is, I don't run from my job, I don't run from my post. You're going to make it worse. Stand your ground and maintain a calm response to undo great offenses. And I think there may be a translation that rendered it something like that a calm response can undo a great offense. That's a life principle. That's a key life principle. Yes, sir.
Military, they have that side. Officer gets on, no excuses, sir. No excuses.
I think that's maybe Solomon is coming out, of life, and we all have excuses, and there is a rule in life that just says no, and a rule of righteousness, a rule of what profit has a man in all of his labor. If you are engaging in labor and you stop, guess what? There is no profit. You just gotta do it. And that is, I think, really the import of our text here. And has issues with the rich and poor. He's looking at injustice or things that don't ride the same there. And I guess the overarching piece of this lesson is that the work that we are called to enjoy the labor, the scriptures repeatedly say, then he just basically just says, well, look, I got more hevel, I got more nonsense, and that nonsense is this text. He who digs a pit will fall into it. A serpent will bite him who breaks through a wall. He who quarries stone will be hurt by them, or is hurt by them. And he who splits logs is endangered by them. And if the iron is blunt, one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. But wisdom helps one to succeed. If the serpent bites before it is charmed, There is no advantage to the charmer. Pretty poetic to me. Seems like we ought to be able to extrapolate all the little precepts out of that. And I don't think that it's like overemphasizing any one of those things. He's just referring to various occupations around the city that you can get yourself hurt. And he's observing what benefit has man in the work that he does under the sun. And before he exits this, he's a cynic, okay? He's looking at life as it is under the sun. And he's going, here's another thing for you. That work you're supposed to go out and enjoy, well, the more you do, the more you risk of getting hurt.
Sounds to me like he's doing a comparison between, and all of these basically are teaching the same thing. A
Yep.
moment of carelessness can get you in big trouble.
Yes.
And he's
Good.
comparing
Good.
The physical attributes of carelessness to the moral attributes of carelessness.
Yes.
Just like home may fly and hit him out somewhere.
Right.
He may be injured. But a moment's carelessness with the moral aptitude will do the same danger, but spiritually as well as reputation.
And that is exactly, he's just using all these observations because, what you just described is as he's making these observations, there's an application that's spiritual to us, and we go, well, I'm not seeing a whole lot of that. Well, we know what the conclusion of the entire matter is fear God and keep his commandments. So to what Terry just said, we're studying wisdom literature. We're talking about just precepts of how you do your job, how you go to work, how you just have this life that is of integrity and consistency. And there it is. It is through the observation of these things, and when people would stop, when they make a mistake, when the boss ain't happy, all these little nuances that are in here are the same principles that we do when we kind of lie to ourselves, to God, about why we're not doing things. But here is just, how do you argue with, if the iron is blunt and one does not sharpen the edge, he must use more strength. Now, in Proverbs, we get more of that. We get more of those principles. But, I think it's just so critical that we lay these things to heart. And then labor is the key to life. Yet again, the more you do, the more risk of injury. Kind of like the more you have, the more possessions you own, the more insurance you have to buy. So you see how things function in that way. All right. 11 through 15. Ecclesiastes 10, 11 through 15. A serpent may bite when it is charmed, and the babbler is no good. Oh, did I say that? When it is charmed. A serpent may bite when it is not charmed, and the babbler is no different. The words of the wise man's mouth are gracious, but the lips of a fool shall swallow him up. And the words of his mouth begin with foolishness, and the end of his talk is raving madness. Continuing, a fool also multiplies words. We've already heard that a little bit. No man knows what is to be. No man knows what is to be. Who can tell him what is to come after him? The labor of fools wearies them, and they do not even know how to go to the city. I hope that in that wisdom literature, what do we see in the parallels of this text with the New Testament and with our lives. What does it say about words? What does the New Testament address in that? What does James say? Let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. And what do you feel like in the babbler, what's being referred to here? What do you think when you see, like in this phrase, how it is used? What do you think that you're able to hear? A lot of words, but nothing that is harmonious with truth. The words of the wise man are in the mouth of the gracious. Now, turn to Ephesians chapter 4. And we see what the words of the gracious are. And I've been in Ephesians all day. Ephesians 4, beginning in verse 29. Let no corrupt communication proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearer. So that single verse kind of repeats how we communicate. If we continuously talk without listening, then we're setting ourselves up for failure in life. And as it relates to, when I look at, like in the Ecclesiastes, he's dealing with a body of information that really would put us in the mindset of we're looking at how we, dignity, with wisdom and honor, we live in a proper way, and that we walk circumspectly, not as fools. That takes us into verse 3. And that we are reliable in verse 4. We're consistent in what that we do. And even when things are out of place, we keep our place and maintain our work ethic. Verses 8, 9, 10, 11. And that 11, I believe, also is about, it's no different between the babbler and the serpent that may bite when not charmed. Don't handle things. What does it mean? Let me go back to that verse. The serpent may bite when it is not charmed, and the babbler is no different.
It's not that the babbler is just speaking a lot of words. He's speaking a lot of harmful words.
And
whether it's just some untruths or gossip or whatever it is that may hurt others, just like a serpent
bite. Yeah, see, that's his parallel there is that you're gonna like the snake gonna bite you. The babbler will bite. Something will be said, done and it won't be in accordance with what Ephesians is saying, and that let your thoughts be prepared with how the effect that it will have on the life of another individual. That's in essence the difference between the wise and the fool. And we learn that it's not, and I can't remember the verse that we read, but through the multiplicity of words, a fool is known. And what is that? What is that proverb that, let's see, if you hold your peace and let people think that you're wise, hold your peace and let people think that you don't know anything, or open your mouth and remove all doubt. Yeah. And that is, like I said, holding your peace and knowing when to talk and how to talk. And ultimately, in this study, our desire is this, and that is that he who would love life and see good days, what does that text say? Let him do what? Yeah. Watch his tongue. And seek peace and pursue it. Totally different from the bite of the snake or the fool. There's no bite there. So you're seeking peace, you're pursuing that, which kind of helps you get to the fear God and keep His commandments part of our thought process as we lean into, here, let's get through 11 through 15. I didn't realize how far I still got to go. Picking up in, we have to know the purpose of work. Verse 15 is, the labor of fools wearies them, and they do not even know how to go to the city. Why do you labor?
To provide for yourself.
So I can go to town. Exactly. I got to go to town. I mean, that's what you go, you work so you can get money so you can go to town. Even when I was in Africa, we went to town to get stuff. And he said, you know, remember the other one was that the lazy man, he would dip his bread in the bowl and then wouldn't get it to his mouth. He was just hyperbole speaking to the condition of labor. And he's told us over and over, you work so you can use it. And he's going to use this word in a minute about the money. And this is going to kind of challenge everything he said before about having money and what he's going to say in this text. But verse 15 simply says that the labor of fools wearies them and they don't even know how to go to town. Now, let's get to the next part here. The blessing of kings and princes who exercise self-control. This is how we see, or how Solomon or the critic is looking at life. And he says, woe to you, O land. He's a critic, so he's not going to be optimistic. Woe to you, O land, when your king is a child and your princes feast in the morning. What does that mean? What are they not doing? There you go. They're not getting up and they're not going to work. They're not fulfilling their responsibility. I kind of feel like Solomon's trying to tell us something through the book of Ecclesiastes, but that is certainly it. And then, in contrast, blessed are you, O land, when your king is the son of nobles and your princes feast at the proper time, for strength is not for drunkenness. Or use not your strength. Some of them may say use not your strength for drunkenness. Look at Proverbs 31 and the mother speaking to the children, to the princes, regarding that. Here it is, you know, the other life lesson right there. Strength is not for drunkenness. Somebody read Proverbs 31, verse 4. There you go. It is not for kings, it is not for princes to have intoxicating drink. And verse 5 says, lest they forget the law and pervert justice. So, going to have it in the book of Proverbs, but in the book of Ecclesiastes, before we get out of there, again, don't use your energy to go get drunk. And that's because, well, guess what happens? It takes everything away from you, and you're not able to function in anything that this life has for you. Now, Ecclesiastes 10 and verse 18. The building decays, and through idleness of hands, the house leaks. A feast is made better for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers everything. So first of all, we have in verse 18 this laziness and idle hands, and what's the effect?
Hard work, hard work makes you win. You want anything in this life, take hard work. And also go to work. If you go to work, just don't go to work and show up. You can also refer to Colossians 3:23, paraphrasing.
At work as working to the Lord. So it is the effect of lacking a work ethic. He's been teaching it all along, but now he's showing that it leads to decay. So your world and the things that you depend upon are going to fall. You know, your roof's going to leak. You're going to have a problem. So, I got to, verse 19, but money answers everything. What does 7:12 say? What else has he said about money that was in a positive sense? Chapter 7 and verse 12. Okay, so money answers everything, and it is a defense. Now you put them two together, and what do you mean? He's trying to get to that final point. He's saying labor to enjoy your meal, your wife, your relationships. You work to enjoy the relationships. But when he's pointing, like in chapter 10, we're looking at practical aspects of a ruler, of leadership, of having a person of reputation, but folly. And what does he mean, money answers everything? I believe that in this context, all the things that seem to be out of order can be rearranged with money. And he says something here at the end. It is about that time. In Ecclesiastes 10, let me get to, 19, verse 19. A feast is made for laughter, and wine makes merry, but money answers everything, verse 19. Do not curse the king, even in your thought. Do not curse the rich, even in your bedroom. For a bird of the air may carry your voice, and a bird in flight may tell the matter. What kind of wisdom is that?
Money's always watching. Be careful what you say, be careful what you do, regardless.
I mean, he has said, keep your mouth shut. Especially, why would you speak evil of those that are in the power to control? And I think that he's making a petition here. Not that we're not compromising anything. This is a life decision of how you function in a world that you're not the guy with the money or the control. And go back to verse 1. If it broke apart, you have a little bit of, you got sweet smelling stuff, and then the next thing you know, your honor and credibility because of foolishness is damaged. Now, you are in a position where you're under those that have power to help you function. But you're going to let your mouth mess up your life. And that's, in essence, what we have here. Use your words wisely. Today we have social media, so whatever you post out there is going to be all over the place, and now it's on the rooftop. But what he's saying is that just be thoughtful, respectful, and use good sense in coming in to these places. Verses 16, what is implied by the bird of the air may carry your voice and tell the matter? Little bird told me. Isn't that where that comes from? What do you think he's meaning? What do you mean by that? Well, in that day, you didn't have phones. You didn't have real good insulation and walls, so anybody could be outside your window and listening with big ears. And from what I understand in that culture, that if there was any thought of insurrection or somebody against the king, that he would have his people out there with big ears. And the bird of the air carrying your voice and tell a matter. I just wanted to just play with the word gossip. And how that you think, oh, well, it's just not going to matter just to tell this individual in quiet. It's just not going to matter.
That person may tell 10 others.
Exactly. It does make a difference. And the difference is keep your mouth quiet. Speak those things that are good to the use of edifying. So, conclusion, thank you. A little bit more difficult. Next session is going to be a little easier, and then we're going to get into growing old. That's a beautiful text on how you can just look at yourself as you age and watch all the things that fall apart. And it gives you a play-by-play description of what happens. It's really good. Your hair turns gray or falls out. You can't see very well. You can't hear very well. But then you can't sleep at all. And then a grasshopper gets in the corner of the room and you can't catch him. So, it's just everything that goes on in life. And this is where we're going to get to. But he's teaching us what profit has a man in his labor. And these are the principles that we can learn from. We'll post up there and we'll see you Sunday, Lord willing.
What about